What's good, everyone? My name is Sonic, and I'd like to welcome you back to the fourth Wall Splat podcast. As we all know, Rumbleverse has sunset and it's not available to play anymore, but that doesn't mean it's been forgotten by any means. Some people would say that absence makes the heart grow fonder, so I'm bringing in some people who really put in work for the Rumbleverse community and also miss the game dearly. Because hey, Rumbleverse is awesome and we still want to talk about it. So I got some recorded games that I've been saving for you to watch in the background while we talk about important topics with the players that made this game an unforgettable experience. My guest today is InvestigationCone, aka IC. For those of you who don't know already, he was the behind-the-scenes guy keeping track of the stats during the Big Grapple League and Tournament events. So you've been pretty instrumental in the largest Rumbleverse matches the world has ever seen. We're going to talk a bit about competitive Rumbleverse in this episode of the Fourth Wall Splat podcast. So listen in. So IC, thank you for coming on the show. Can you tell me a little bit about the process behind the scenes to prepare for the Big Grapple events?
Yes, certainly. So there actually was not super complicated or a huge amount of production, but there was a little bit we did. We had everything set up fairly automated. So between each individual event, week to week, we made largely consisted of Tupperware finding a host, making sure everything was okay with our queue and the chatbot, and then on my side, making sure that the background spreadsheets that we were using to score and track everything was ready to go. It was only an hour or two of work for that, and then the main work was just trying to put together a good show, trying to get together stats for commentators to talk about, just trying to make content so everything went smoothly and flowed. On the actual day of the event, like the last hour before the event was where most of the tight work happened, where we had to manage the queue bot. We had sort of an automated line, and then getting that pulled and getting all the entrants for that day populated, just because the nature of a free event, a lot of people will sign up and then forget about the event. So we had to try and make sure that it was full. Yep.
Yeah, it was fun watching the queue and thinking I was way down at one time, I think 35th or something like that, and ended up just barely making it in. So fortunately, I was there. I was able to get into one of the big grapples. I think it was the first one. But that was a lot of fun. That queue managed system was pretty impressive, I would say.
Yeah, it was neat. You know, we were sort of adapting something not designed exactly for this, but trying to make it work well enough. And that honestly was a lot. The Big Grapple was that as well. The game was not directly designed for competitive work. We were trying to put together a decent competitive scene with the tools that we had available.
Yeah, and it was a great job overall. And we'll talk about that a little bit more later too, how that worked out. But it was a good time. It did
Thank
quite
you.
well. So did you have like a passion for the stats ahead of this event, or is it just something that you learned about just for this event because someone had to do it?
A little bit of both. So, I'm an analytical chemist. I do a lot of testing where we have to do sort of on the fly calcs. So, I do a moderate amount of Excel. I know enough about spreadsheets and that to know that there's a huge amount of things that they can do for automation that almost verge on coding. But in my work, because I'm working with medical devices, I don't get a chance to do that because if you're doing a process, you have to, in that scene, you have to make sure it's going to do exactly what you want. So this was a really good chance to kind of play around with some of the expanded Excel stuff. And technically I was using Google Sheets, but a lot of the charts and everything were automated. Once the raw scores were entered, the rankings automatically adjusted and that. So it was fun to set all this up so that we would have good graphics to show on the event. But then once we had that data in there, I'd spend some time each week seeing what I could do with it. Now that we know all these points, how can you look at it and present it? So that was a lot of my role there. Getting into it, I just messaged Tupperware and said, "Hey, do you want some help on this event?" And he said, "Sure, I guess." And then I went in like that first week. I went in and found out he didn't have a score sheet set up, and he said he was planning to just write some stuff down, and I was like, we can do better than that. So I put it all together and said, hey, check this out, I did this, and he was pretty impressed. So and then all of the trophy, all the other stuff I did in the background was, I'd have an idea and say, well, this would be kind of neat. Let's see if this works, and put together the package. So.
That's impressive. It sounds like it came together really quickly then, and I thought it was very interesting to see those stats update live because it was on Google Sheets, you said, while you were typing in things, finishing up the rankings for the game. We could see people moving around on the list, so that was pretty interesting. It was just impressive overall, especially if you did it in a quick time frame there.
Yeah, overall, I figure total across the entire life of Rumbleverse, I counted it up. It's a couple 100 hours that I put in, but none of it, for the most part, none of it was all at once. It was generally just the actual first event went super smoothly and really went well, and we were surprised. And then at that point, we had we have a basic show ready to go. That was set up. So then each week it'd be an hour or two here or there saying, well, what can we do a little bit more, and just sort of build on it each week.
Yeah, that's good. The first event didn't go smoothly for me personally. I got Keybet dropped twice by the same person in 2 different games for I think last place and second last place. So that was a really bad start for me. It did better after that, but didn't. It kept me out of the points run, that's for sure.
So the other, I said this a couple times during the events, when I hear stories like this, the other reason that I was behind the scenes of the Big Grapple instead of entering it is because I did the first community night that Tupperware set up with all of the top players and got absolutely wrecked. And so after that, I was like, all right, at first I was thinking, well, maybe I'll enter this tournament. I don't think I'm going to excel. Maybe I'll be okay. And after the first community event, I was like, all right, maybe the best way to be part of the community is to help bring the event to the community instead of going out at 38th place. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm glad you did because you did such a good job of it, but that's kind of funny. I had almost the opposite of experience in that I did okay in some of those community events that were held, and then I was like, oh, I'll do okay in the Big Grapple. I didn't expect to win, but I had some bad luck, and then everyone was good, so it was hard, but that was fun. Really quickly though, about the other things you made for it, you created 2 trophies for the system, and then you helped. I guess there was fundraising for the last invitational, but you had the popcorn party trophy for that. What made you decide to create those?
So it was after we got into the first week or two of season 1 of our event, people were saying, hey, we should get a belt, like maybe get a title belt made or something like that. And so that's what sort of started the thought of it. Is it was like, well, it'd be nice to have a trophy like that. We did have an agreement with Iron Galaxy about running an event that said had some restrictions on what we could and could not do. And one of the things we could not do was change the prize or award structure partway through an event. So that's why there was no season 1 trophy, but that sort of started the thought. So I went through, basically I have a 3D printer. I have a lot of different hobbies that I'll get into, do a little bit with. I'll get into it, buy some things to do it, get into it a little bit, and then sort of lose interest and move on to other stuff. So basically, Rumbleverse acted as a really, really good focusing mechanism, game that I really like, and a community that I was really enjoying being part of. Just starting to sort of pull all these little bits and things that I had laying around and applying them. So I'd done a little bit of 3D modeling, but not much at all. I'm not at all good at it, but passable. And so just said, well, what can I make? What sort of objects we can do? And went through a couple of iterations and bounced them off of Tupperware and that, and came up with something that turned out to work pretty well.
Yeah, it was incredibly, like, the fact that the trophy works like it
Mhm.
does in the game is insane.
So that's sort of a recurring theme for a lot of the stuff I did is I or someone would just have the stray thought, and I'd be like, oh nuts, now I have to figure out now I have to figure this out. Now I have to put in
Yeah.
a little bit of work to do this because the thought occurred to me.
Yeah, that's great. You're not alone in having multiple hobbies that people drop. I'm sure actually
Mhm.
everybody does that anyway. It's always exciting to start something new. It's hard to finish things, unfortunately. Uh, but yeah, and it can be exciting when you have a challenge, and it's a fun challenge
Mhm.
to finish that up. All right, so let's talk about some of the actual stats, what we actually learned here through your competitive Rumbleverse tracking sheet here. We've got the stats on the moves that worked for the most successful players in this game. So first of all, what was the most used move by high level players here?
So the most used move by high level players was hands down Sumo Slap. The Sumo
Yeah.
Slap family was absolutely dominating among winners of our events. And that's actually the reason I have these stats is during an event someone said, "Hey, I wonder how many. Seems like people are using Sumo Slap a lot. I wonder exactly how many." And I said, "Oh, well, now I want to know that too." So that's
Find
when I
out.
started collecting it. It actually doesn't take that much time to go harvest the winner stats from the events if you do it in little bits. But it was 61% of winners of all of the Big Grapple events that we did for games were using some
Wow.
form of Sumo Slap.
That
And
in-
that's, yep,
that includes the invitational when it had been changed, like after it had been
that
changed.
that does just a little bit. So there was one example of Sumo Slap in the Invitational. But yes, between the end of season 2 and the Invitational was when they dropped the big Sumo Slap nerf,
Right.
which made it a lot less desirable.
True. Why do you think Sumo Slap, or what was your reason for Sumo Slap being so popular at the time? Kind of.
So it was a really good strike move. It came out extremely fast. It had up until January 17th patch, it had really fast recovery. And so we'd see that in a lot of the matches. Is you do Sumo Slap, and even if it was blocked, uh, it was a really powerful thing to just bust out Sumo Slap again. And there was a lot of
Yep.
lot of discussion and discourse on that. Keats had was vocal that there was a counter for it, which I believe was if you had a strike, if you blocked their Sumo Slap, busting out the strike would tip the advantage in your favor. I feel like it was at best only slight. It still wasn't like a true counter for it. It was a sort of stalemate that was maybe slightly in your advantage if you kept doing it. But yeah, just
Yep.
overall, it didn't have good damage, but it
No.
had good safe strike, and that's sort of something we do see through the player stats is you very rarely or never. I'd have to actually count it up. Generally, nobody used double vicious moves. For the specials, there would always be at least one strike special,
Mhm.
and that's because of the way that a strike special sort of broke out of the basic rock paper scissors of block vicious normal strike. Is fast strike viciouses or fast strike specials, I should say, um, over overrule normal and sort of break you out of the basic play when you and your opponent are squaring off. So strike specials were pretty much something that was in everybody's toolkit.
Yeah, they've always been really popular. I think Sumo Slap specifically, before the season 2.5 update, it did everything. It was almost always safe in a sense. If you did it at max range, you could dodge and they couldn't really punish except for with a couple of specific moves, maybe. The only thing it couldn't really do was damage, and that led to a couple of really long matches in the Big Grapple. I didn't ask about this stat beforehand, but do you have any idea how long the longest match was?
Um, not I don't have like hard data for that. It was in the 40 some minute range because
That's nuts.
somebody was in chat timing it, and I I was not a fan of the matches in that zone. So
Hmm.
that actually came about sort of unintended consequences, and the devs that we had a lot of info coming out from uh, Keats, who was really involved in the community and talking a lot about the game, and he acknowledged this is design changes, you have to look at them. You can't make a design change to a game and know exactly what its output is going to be. You can sort of predict it, but
Hmm.
when you're deciding what to buff and what to nerf, or combine those two words,
Yeah,
which sometimes happens.
it does
You
happen.
when you make that change, you need to make the change a little bit and see how it interacts and see how the community rolls with it. And that's a case of from community input, they decided to make it so healing perks were guaranteed after you got a certain number of perks. And so that healing change combined with how superstar meter worked, combined with things like the way super meter was awarded from Sumo Slap, to make for some really long matches among top players. I generally didn't run into that in the games I was playing. I'm sort of in the
Yeah.
mid card level of play, so I think I either got eliminated early or just wasn't running against people who could optimize it. But that zone, before they made the late game changes to reduce super meter, made it so that people were just building up super meter and healing faster than they were being worn down in the final ring.
Yeah, with the low damage and everybody having Sumo Slap at the time, that
Mhm.
seemed to be the case, and it made for some really long matches. When actually playing casuals, that never happened to me. I think like an average game was probably about 12, 13 minutes or something like that.
Mhm.
I've had, I think, one or two like 20-minute games. That's probably the longest I've ever had in a pub match. But the Big Grapple had a couple, especially earlier on, that lasted a very long time.
Mhm. And
So,
I heard VZ Orlandos's European event had a couple matches that were on the hour time scale or so.
wow, that's nuts. I would say I want to go back and watch those, but I kind of don't because that's way too long. And I know the updates that they made since then, like the moving circle, helped that because eventually everybody would end up in the water.
Mhm.
So good updates all around there. They hopefully fixed a lot of those things, but yeah, we had some long matches, and it's because of Sumo Slap. Now, after the final update was made, Sumo Slap was changed a lot. What was the popular move after that?
So I feel like the slightest edge. I only had 5 games of data after that patch, so this
Mm-hmm.
is it's always been a struggle against maybe seeing a trend, but there not being enough points to know for sure.
Yep.
It looks like the shots. So we had uh, out of the 5 games. 3 of them were won by someone using some form of shot. There was two Cosmo shots and a wrecked shot. So I think that
Yep.
was a slight edge. I feel like had we been able to do a full season 3 of the Big Grapple, I feel like we would have seen a lot more of the kick family. The super kick and super duper kick were
Mm-hmm.
sort of consistently improved during the life of the game, and were actually my favorite special strike.
I found that I had a lot more fun with them near the end, oddly, and I don't know that they actually changed really throughout the game. They just became better because other things changed a bit.
So they
Uh,
did the season 2 update gave it a tracking fix that made it a lot more
right.
reliable and
Yeah.
predictable. So that's when I started actually looking hard at it. It was
Yeah.
I think super kick was my least favorite move in season 1.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Even in season two, I probably wouldn't pick up the regular super kick, the green version, but the blue one was a lot of fun. The only difficulty with it sometimes, or the issue, is that you could kick them so far away that you couldn't really do any follow up after unless there was a wall. If there was a wall, it was no problem.
Mhm.
Then you can get some good combos, and at the time too, you could triple wall splat people, kick them 3 times into the wall. That was a little much. That got changed later, but super kick, it was fast too. That's what made it better too. So, based on your analysis and knowledge of the players. We all made a few friends at least throughout Rumbleverse. What do you feel helped the top players win the most consistently? And was it like a specific move or a perk or a stat build or something else?
So I was looking hard at the perks throughout this whole thing to see if there was anything that really, like, there was a perk that you'd be able to say, oh man, definitely this perk. Early on, I'd say Woo, the one that has you build more super meter. Until they tweaked how uh, the super meter worked. That correlated pretty well with winners. But overall, there wasn't, and I think my real answer here is from seeing the players, seeing all this high level play. People that come into it with sort of a fighting game mindset, and a lot of the players we see in the Big Grapple actually came over from competitive fighting games, and I think a lot of them were actually from the Marvel series, possibly just because of the social network aspect of that. Tupperware is heavily involved in competitive Marvel versus Capcom,
Yeah,
but
great game.
it comes down to like what I see, seeing players like Saikin play, just being able to out mind game your opponent. Knowing conditioning opponents, throwing out moves that are sometimes unsafe. At times where you think you can get away with it, and being right is what I feel really separates out the top players. There was a community match where we were watching a player after I got eliminated who was throwing out javelin tackle, and javelin tackle is so unsafe if you miss it. And he was missing it
Hmm.
a bunch, but no one was punishing him. And I feel like
Yeah.
among the top players, the sort of the mind game aspect that also exists in fighting games is where they really excel. Is just being able to predict, okay, I think the opponent's about to do this, or here's an opportunity. I know I shouldn't do this, but this is a good
Mhm.
zone.
The
It comes down
unexpected.
to um, the 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 monologue from The Princess Bride, which is an amazing movie of Vizzini when he's trying to decide which cup has the poison in it, and clearly I know that you would not choose the cup in front of me, so I should choose the cup in front of you, but you know that, so that means I can't choose the one in front of you either. Is sort of a fundamental skill that sort of developed underneath competitive fighting game play that plays really well in Rumbleverse.
Yeah, for sure. Just what is that? The a double bluff? There's the scenario
Mhm,
name for that. I can't remember exactly what it is,
mhm.
but that's a good one. I came over kind of from Marvel vs. Capcom as well. Played that semi-competitively, only locally. I never went to big tournaments or anything, but I know that the fighting game mentality definitely gave me an edge up over some of the friends that I played with who didn't really play fighting games before or weren't as good, didn't have as much familiarity with it. But yeah, mind games and knowing when to surprise someone basically with something that is unsafe, but they won't expect it. So that's really important. And positioning helped a lot in this game
Mhm.
too, because you could get wall combos and whatnot. So
Yeah,
I
that was
noticed.
something that I was as a personal player, I it was what I was mostly working on when I was playing, is trying to recognize, okay, the environment here would let me Irish whip in this direction and that, and
Mhm.
it was always that was a challenge. It was something new and different to have to learn in the game.
Yeah, all the platforming in general is brand new, basically. Even for 3D fighting game players, you can't just Irish whip your opponent in any direction. Typically, I don't know of any fighting game where you can do that at least. So that made water plays so much more dangerous, especially and depending on the move set you had, you could put someone in the water, or you could put someone in a much worse situation very quickly off of one hit, like a charge chop or something like that. That made it scary, especially when you know who you're fighting against is good. You have to position yourself well, but you could be thrown in any direction still. So I wanted to bring up one other thing I found. I was looking through your stats here, and I noticed that in 47 combined games between the two seasons of the Big Grapple and the Invitational itself, There are only 7 cases where the winner took more arm pods than core pods, and probably only once in each season that happened, or 3 times in total when it was obvious that someone's game plan from the beginning was actually to take lots of arm pods because they really went in on it. I thought that was pretty fun. I mean, having health is very important, especially when you end up with circles that have 20 plus people in them at the end. But do you ever see that changing?
So we do. I did track pods as well. I was mostly focusing on stamina pods and how no one used them initially, and that's
right.
something that Iron Galaxy like noticed and said, "No, we're gonna make you guys use leg pods. We're gonna make it worth it to use leg pods." I mean, I think
did.
a lot. Yeah. I usually went even build, but like fairly even amounts of everything. But yeah, I mean it is really high risk, high reward to load up on arm pods. You become a glass cannon, and certainly you can do some decent damage, but once you get to the final ring, even someone who went with a more balanced build would be most of the game through the lifetime, through the patches and that, if you did not have some core pods, you were like one serious combo away from being downed or KO'd. And I think a lot of that's sort of the mindset of the part of that feeds into the mindset of the people who won. Our most decorated player was Triumph, and he was very much not an arm pod guy. So his wins his wins in the games sort of skewed the averages over towards core, I think.
It definitely did. I'm trying to look through this really quickly right now. I can't find a game where he took any arm pods.
I think he had one with one, but
yeah,
I could. You know what? That's actually Stepdad Ryan. So.
Oh no! In the very last one, he did have one.
Yep.
So, yeah, arm pods, best pods, obviously.
And
I'm very
didn't.
Surprised.
Yeah, I didn't review that game to see if maybe that was a desperation pod, like when the circle got small and he failed to loot another core.
Probably. That's one thing that they, I think, changed a little bit throughout the seasons, and towards the end of the game even, they made more boxes come in at later times in the game. And that's because in the earlier versions of competitive Rumbleverse, people didn't always find pods. Like I know that when I was playing in some of the community days, a lot of people just don't fight at the beginning, because if you fight at the beginning, you're not getting pods at all. So yeah, I just took what I could, and I played weird builds that I never would in a casual game, because other people would fight. They would do other things with their time instead of looting immediately. So that's one very interesting difference between competitive and casual Rumbleverse there.
And I agree. I do feel like from seeing top players play in that, like on their own streams and that as well, that sort of the meta for competitive Rumbleverse for most of the time we were playing is, if you get into a fight early, the belief is that you end up sort of behind on the power curve. I guess that's kind of comes from the League of Legends style games where you have that idea as well. Is the time you spend fighting that player, even if you win fairly quickly, you're now sort of behind on looting and character building compared to whatever opponent you're about to run into.
Yep, you wouldn't have time to get pods, and I think, as we see here, like core pods, very important. And if you didn't get them, you probably weren't surviving till the end of the game, because there's just too many people, too much randomness when there's 20 plus people in a circle. It can be totally fine if you end up like in a 1v1 or even like a 1v1v1 with 3 people or something like that. You can survive, but you're spending time not upgrading your character to the max potential that it has. You are getting perks, which is good, but health seems to have triumphed those overall. As I say, as Triumph has won everything. So, I mean, he proved it in that sense. So how do you feel about the overall balance of the game then at the end of Season 2 well, season 2, so it was after 2.5 for competitive play. We only got one tournament there. It was the Invitational, and obviously we would love to see more in the future. But a lot of changes were made since the beginning of the game when like teleporting tackles were everywhere and stuff. How do you feel about competitive play and the balance of the game towards the end?
It's this is the most tragic thing is I think that is the version that I thought really worked best is what they did right before the sunset. I really liked the moving ring. The that addition made it so that issues with sumo, like even if they had not changed how the superstar ended, or how superstar was awarded in final ring, the moving ring alone would take care of the long match problem. I think the
Mm-hmm.
superstar meter change was good too. That was a good change to sort of reduce the level of healing people would get in the final ring. And as a whole, I thought the game ended in a really good place. And part of that might just be that the top players didn't have time to fully break it to find out what else was busted. Um,
Yeah.
but had the game continued, there would be more cycles of balance in that. But no, I thought it turned out really well.
Yeah, there would have been some new moves, of course, and then changes to the balance of them. Although I agree, I think it was an extremely good place at the end. I didn't feel like there was anything specifically that was overpowered, or at least too overpowered that it wasn't okay, that it wasn't breaking anything. And at the very least, with the moving circles, at the end of the game, everybody's going in the water. So you have a maximum time limit. If you're not fighting them, then you're someone's gonna survive just by not jumping in the water, basically. And with
Yeah,
the, go ahead.
sorry, one thing I did really like about that is it finally made rocket jump something that you'd consider taking,
Yeah.
even if you just kept the book in your pocket for the final ring. There were some really hype finishes I saw from people who streamed, where they used rocket jump to just wade out the circle going into the water, and that was really neat, and having that option.
Yeah, that made. Uh, I don't want to say it was a useless move early on. It was good for traversal, obviously, but it didn't do any damage. The other change that they made to it was a lot of fun too. But
Mhm.
yeah, just the fact that you had to go over the water at some point, and that would let you survive just a couple, well, not even a couple seconds, like a second longer, if even, than the next person or the last person otherwise. So did make some hype events. There's definitely a few YouTube compilations that include that kind of stuff. So that's a good time. So if Rumbleverse did continue, or if it comes back, how do you think the competitive scene would have evolved over time? Do you think there would be any significant changes aside from new moves coming in?
Um, I think it's hard to say. So like one of the things we would occasionally chat about is like, all right, so like what would a physical event look like for Rumbleverse if you wanted to do Rumbleverse at DreamHack or something, and it's the nature of the game as it exists means that it's sort of stuck in an online environment, and that's fine. It's certainly more convenient to do an online tournament. People can join from their living rooms in that. But I sort of wonder what it would be like if you could actually get everyone, get 40 people in person to play. And that was sort of my
Mm-hmm.
my far off dream of like really stepping it up. Um,
Your own
you know,
esports.
in terms of going true esports, you know, there's a lot of products out on the market. There's a lot of games all competing for that. And so I sort of feel streaming for this as well, like trying to stream as a career. Um, Everything is sort of logarithmically biased. The top 0.1% of successes are the ones that can actually sort of sustain themselves and make money, and that's be streamer channels for viewers of that or games and events. And being like even in the top one or top 10% of popularity for that may
Mhm.
not quite hit the threshold to really sort of bust out and be go big esports. So I
Yeah.
wasn't. I doubt we would. I doubt Rumbleverse would be main stage grand final of some like in person event or online event. But certainly it was really successful for what it was, having a really fun game and community to sort of rally around it. If it had
Mhm.
continued, we absolutely would have still been putting on events, having players, and having great times.
For sure, yeah. I mean, I'll be the first person to admit that I didn't think competitive Rumbleverse would really work at all, in the sense that, it's a battle royale, so there's the randomness of that with third parties, and then stuff like weapons and water circles to an extent. Um, I didn't think that people, like players who are good, could be consistent, right?
Mhm.
So we did end up seeing a bunch of players that had multiple wins, and somehow we ended up with one very clear winner in Triumph who got all three of these events, which is totally nuts. But there were a number of other people who did consistently well, and they figured out how to survive in the chaos. So in that sense, I feel like I was wrong in a way. I'll say a half mark at least here, because it might be an unpopular opinion with the people who are listening to this podcast, but I don't think the chaos of 20 plus people in the end circle translates super well into competitive esports. That there's just too much going on at any given time. How do you follow that much information at a time? So I think we would have a little bit of trouble with that in terms of making it extremely popular. But it's a heck of a lot of fun still, and it's clear that we do have people who figured it out. They can survive, they can win games, they can place well, at least fairly consistently. So it's all right.
The statistician answer to that is you can make that work as long as you have enough data points. So
Yeah.
if you ran a 100 game series with a fair point system, then you'd have a pretty good idea who would win and who would not. Now, of course, there's uh, that would never be realistic. But as a whole, I feel like the Ranbat format that we used for the Big Grapple worked really well. And that was all credit for that goes to Tubboware. He had that fully set up. It was some competitive fighting games used that for their weekly series, and he found and adapted that, and it
Mhm.
basically, as the format was what he came up with. He said this should probably work, and it did. I feel.
Yeah, it did. I would say the invitational at the end, when we got stats for private matches, that actually did make a huge change in terms of just people being more willing to fight near the beginning of the game or middle of the game, at least, instead of waiting to the end. We had a couple of people who would chase others around just to get the elimination because you got points for that. It wasn't like the first two seasons where it was literally just be the last person alive. That doesn't really encourage you to fight so much. Mole. I'm gonna call him out there for a second, but I'm surprised that a lot more people didn't use his strategy of just hiding in a bush,
Mhm.
making yourself not seen basically as much
There
as possible. So, but the invitational did make things more exciting because getting those KOs was worth a lot more points, or was worth some points. In which case, it encouraged people to fight, and we had smaller circles at that point too, which was great.
Yeah, it's also, I mean, it's a shame we did not get a chance to get more events and sort of fine tune that system. I'm not sure. It's
Mm-hmm.
possible that was the exact values in that for it wasn't quite where we wanted it to be, but we only had the one shot at it, and it worked pretty well. Um, there was one match when you talked about avoiding combat. There was one match that really stuck out where we had a final that was the pool side at Loki Key, and there was a little bit of monorail track, like a mile up, and
Oh yeah.
there were like four people up there emoting for about 10 minutes. And
Yeah,
that's
that was a little much.
Strategy wise, that's possibly the best chance of success is to not mix it up until you have to. But yeah.
It absolutely was. Yeah, that was in the invitational when chaos counted, but still placement was a big part of it, and there
Mhm.
was some money on the line. So yeah, the best thing you could do is not die.
Mhm.
So staying out of combat was good then. Um, that's good. I'm gonna leave or go off with one more question that I want to ask to everyone that I talk to on the show if we have some more guests. So I wanted to say, what is the one thing you feel Rumbleverse did extremely well?
So the one thing it did extremely well was that everything it did worked really well, and that's hard. It's very easy to come up with an interesting concept for a game, and then you play it, and you're like, I don't like the way this feels. Like the movement was tight, the combat was really good, just the sort of the level of polish and the way everything played. So to put it into one words, we'll say it's the controls. The controls
Okay.
and player interaction with the environment in all cases was just like absolutely top notch, and it's the sort of thing that I you can't necessarily just say we'll make this game feel really good. They definitely put in the
Hmm.
work to put together something that just felt amazing.
Definitely, it's a special game in that sense, and I agree. We kind of said I said one thing, but you turned it into five things and then turned it back into one thing again. So I respect that. The game did feel very good, platforming and everything, movement based, all the combat, all felt impactful and fun and fast and responsive. So they did a really good job of that. With that, though, I'm going to ring the bell here and call it a match. Thank you, everyone, for listening to us talk competitive Rumbleverse on the Fourth Wall Splat podcast, brought to you by Peak Entertainment Conglomerate. And thank you to Investigation Cone for bringing your expertise to the show.
Thank you for having me.
The citizens of Grapple City appreciate the work you've put in to make the events run smoothly. Hey, now, do you think we can get those damage reports on my desk by Monday? The city council is going to have a bit of a heart attack when they see the repair costs for the Big Grapple, so we need to massage these numbers a little bit to make sure they understand it's worth it.